The Torah goes out of its way to portray non-Jews positively and Jews negatively. God is ethic-centered, not ethnic-centered.
And what I'm left with is exactly what Prager says. Like this is so different than everything else. You think of like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the founders of the Jewish race. Jacob's got, it's this trailer trash story with the two sisters and his wives
being stolen.
Yeah, and the two wives are swapping who gets to sleep with him what night, and over soup. If you'll feed me, you can have him. And you're like, who would write this?
Okay, so the next one is really interesting. I think you and I both marked this one. It says how Jews are portrayed in the Torah. Yeah. And this is an interesting thing. I think this is the one where they're talking about like the fact that it's the only religious book that says that like
even a historical book, period.
Historical book where it's like they're actually doing dumb stuff and being bad and not behaving. And it's like they're not painted in a positive light, as opposed to say like, go like read Egyptian texts or whatever, right? And it's like, we talked about before, it's like Ramses is awesome. He can do all this cool stuff.
And it doesn't mention the battles lost.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go check that one out.
The Torah goes out of its way. This is one of the fundamental beliefs of my life, to portray non-Jews positively and Jews negatively. It's one of the reasons I believe it's a divine author. If Jews had made up the Torah, they would have come across much more positively. They come across as awful, as a general rule. And non-Jews from...
So it's anti-propaganda.
Anti-propaganda, certainly. Noah is a non-Jew. Of course, there were no Jews at that time. But Moses' father-in-law, who is the great advisor to Moses, is a Midianite priest. The daughter of Pharaoh is a non-Jew. She saves Moses. And it is just a consistent pattern. And I thought that the midwives was part of that pattern. As I say, that God is ethic-centered, not ethnic-centered.
So that one, how Jews are portrayed in the Torah, I think this is really interesting. I think maybe we've even talked about it before, but it's like, this is like such great evidence for, as Prager says, right?
All we're going to do here is agree with what he said.
Yeah. Hey, good job, Dennis.
Yeah. You go through, it's hard to find historical records that display the authors in critical light, even up into recent time. I remember when I was in college, I did a study trip to England, and we were in England and Scotland, and we were in Scotland, and we were at a little local memorial to a military unit, Scottish Highland Infantry, whatever division or whatever, something like that. And I knew enough history to know that these were the guys who were at the Battle of New Orleans when Andrew Jackson spanked them, not mentioned. It said that they went to the Americas. They were deployed in the Americas X years. Did not mention that, and they got their tails kicked at whatever. It mentioned other battles that they were in and won. So it was this memorial to these guys, and it was just like, shh, don't talk about the loss, and that's recent history. You go back to ancient stuff, and man, it's crickets on anything bad. I think you did a little bit of research
around the Exodus.
Well, I was going to say about Sennacherib and the Assyrians in the British Museum.
Yeah.
And on the carvings there, it's like, and he went to Judea and conquered some cities, and it was awesome. No mention of, again, losing at Jerusalem and getting tens of thousands of soldiers killed.
Yeah.
It was just like, yeah, he's awesome. He conquered some stuff.
Well, and the same thing with the Exodus evidence is that you have to kind of look at the context clues surrounding it. Yeah. Because there's both and I'll say generally since we're talking about the Exodus, the late date, early date, there are, that's the predominant views is like early date being 1446 and then late date being like 1260 something. So it's Amenhotep II and Ramses II. They're the kind of the two primary, but there are others. It's like I think Amos the first, and then Akhenaten are two other options that people make. But there's most of the archaeological evidence is around those two, and even that, it's like you're not going to find records of. Like,
and this is when the Jews left.
And this is when they left. You've got to find all these other context clues that are going on, whether it's like the Habiru that are mentioned in the Amarna letters, or maybe other things that happen, like, you know, the palaces being abandoned.
No one's going to write about a loss.
Right. Yeah. And so there's all this stuff, and that's part of the reason why, you know, I think traditionally critical scholars may have said that Exodus didn't happen, but nowadays when you're looking at the archaeological evidence, there is a good bit of evidence, but you're not going to get those exact...
A direct statement from an Egyptian.
Right.
So, you know, when you look at like all these European paintings, you know, Renaissance period or whatever, of nobles, you know, nobody's got buck teeth, zits. You know what I'm saying? Like there's things that the artist is just going to be like, this is not going to make the painting, you know? Mm-hmm. And this is what was always done. You always glossed over your people. And then you read the Old Testament account, and it's got, you know, Judah, who the Messiah would later come from, sleeping with a prostitute and killing people and selling his brother. You know, and it just goes on and on. You know,
Ruth is like a Moab, from Moab.
It's from Moab, a cursed nation.
Yeah.
You've got, you know, David not only committing adultery, which for a king would be kind of like, but then killing her husband, who was one of his top generals. And you read that account, and it goes to great extent to paint, you know, everyone is good except David, you know?
And then he's a man after God's own heart.
Yeah.
At the end of it all.
And what I'm left with is exactly what Prager says. Like this is so different than everything else. So spectacularly different. You think of like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the founders of the Jewish race. Abraham's given his wife away. Jacob is this sort of weasel stealing from his family. And, you know, it just kind of goes on and on. These guys are not good. You know, Jacob's got, it's this trailer trash story with the two sisters and his wives
being stolen.
Yeah, and the two wives are swapping who gets to sleep with him what night, and, you know, over soup. You know, if you'll feed me, you can have him. And you're like, who would write this? You know, maybe God inspired it, because the point he was making was that it's really not about them. Actually, it's not about how great Moses is, or how great Abraham is, or you know, Isaac is, or Jacob is. It's about the fact that God uses broken people, you know? So yeah, I actually love his point.
Yeah. And I think in a similar, it's like you know, it's Israel is he who wrestles with God, right? So that's potentially, I think that's more the point. It's like broken people wrestling with a perfect God. Well, yeah. I can identify with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and just one more point to tie these things together. The heroes being portrayed as flawed, the idea of wrestling with God, and even to go back a little bit to the slavery to self. I think for all of us, we're given two options. One option is to wrestle with God and ourselves. The other is just give up. I mean, you could just give up and give in and just be your worst self and just do all the bad things you want to do. And that's a horrible strategy. You're going to wreck your life. And so really you don't have any choice. You've got to wrestle with God and wrestle with you. And man, humans, we're so flawed. We are, I mean, who amongst us would honestly say, yeah, I really do a good job of obeying myself? You know, when I tell myself, I'm not going to do that again. I want to do right next. Do you really see yourself very well? You know, but if you just totally give in and quit, then, you know, you're going to fall apart. So we're all stuck in this fight with with God and ourselves. And you could try to opt out of it, but I don't think that's going to go very well for you either.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love the fact that the heroes are portrayed as broken. You know, I think it makes the story feel real.
Yep.
Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, click like and subscribe. It really helps us. And if you really enjoyed it, go on over to our website, thelandinthebible.com, and become a supporter. It helps us generate more content and gives you access to our full library of video and Bible study content.